So it's been quite a sort of, shall we say, explosive 24 hours if you're on the left of politics, because the left have been tearing themselves apart, taking pops at Keir Starmer. Owen Jones has been absolutely and utterly beside himself with rage. We've got John McDonnell saying that he doesn't believe that Rebecca Long-Bailey should have been fired. Rebecca Long-Bailey herself was offered the opportunity to stay in the job that she had, which was, of course, Shadow Education Secretary, but she refused to remove the tweet in which she said that Maxine Peak was a diamond, despite the fact that Maxine Peak, in her piece and an interview in the Independent, actually asserted that the reason that George Floyd was dead was because the Minneapolis police had learned how to put the knee on the neck from the Israeli Defence Force. And that, of course, turns out to be completely and utterly wrong. Was it anti-Semitic? There are those who don't think it is. John McDonnell's one of them. That's not really the point, though. What would appear to be the case here is that Keir Starmer has come up against the far left in the sort of the guise of Rebecca Long-Bailey, and he has taken a stand, and he's decided that this is a good opportunity, perhaps, to set the record straight for Labour and to put Labour back now on a more centrist footing. Let's talk to John McTernan, Tony Blair's former political secretary, to see what he makes of it all. John, very good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. Is this an attempt by Keir Starmer to drag Labour back to the centre, or is it something that's just happened and just sort of come up?
Look, I think it's a bit of both. Keir Starmer has to show he's a strong leader. And in the face of this, he had to sack Rebecca Long-Bailey. It was wrong for her to endorse the Maxine Peak interview. It was wrong for her to refuse to withdraw her tweet, to apologise. It's been wrong for her. She's not taken it off Twitter.
No, it's still there, isn't it?
Yeah. So she's unrepentant on that. And the thing is, the death of George Floyd, for which police officers are being prosecuted, is a crime. You don't need to make it any more of it than condemn it as a crime by police officers. To attach it in this way to a strange conspiracy theory that the reason the American police did that was because they've been taught, not actually by the IDF, by, I think she says, Israeli secret services. So she's saying that Mossad did the training.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of, the minute you read something like that, you're in the realms of crazy conspiracy theory, cranks. At that point, you shouldn't be doing retweeting, even if you say retweets are not endorsements. You should be walking away. You should be condemning if you're a frontbencher. And this is what it amounts to. Labour frontbenchers don't speak for themselves. They speak for the party. They are the voice of the party. They're the voice of the leader. The leader can't speak on every issue. He's got to trust his frontbench and their judgment. He clearly can't trust Rebecca Long-Bailey. Now, I would never have appointed her in the first place. I thought that was a sign of weakness, but he's shown real strength, speed and strength now. And I think the screams of pain from the left of the party are exactly what he would want. Keir wants to show to the centre ground of British politics, very different leader from Jeremy Corbyn, and you don't do that just by doing better at PMQs.
No, that's true. We can talk about PMQs in a bit. But then some would say, of course, Keir Starmer worked on the front bench under Jeremy Corbyn, and he wasn't a particularly enthusiastic anti-Semite crusader then.
Keir worked on the front bench. He wasn't the leader. He positioned himself through what he did on the front bench to be able to take over from Jeremy Corbyn, probably the most effective revenge on Jeremy Corbyn you could ever imagine. But he has always been strong and opponent of anti-Semitism, in his career as a lawyer, but also in his career as an MP and on the front bench. He never hung around with any of those very strange fringe groups, which were the love and joy of Jeremy Corbyn when he was the leader.
Yes, quite. And as far as Rebecca Long-Bailey is concerned, at first my initial reaction was she's probably retweeted it without reading the whole article, because I know, because as a journalist, and probably yourself, John, as well, we both probably will read most of the entire article before we retweet it. But not everybody does. But the fact that she didn't want to remove it and was kind of, she's more or less saying she wasn't given the opportunity to have a conversation with Keir Starmer, suggests otherwise, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it suggests that she actually wants to argue the toss, say actually she had a case, or maybe she misexpressed herself. She wasn't willing to get into condemning Maxine Peak, and maybe that's because Maxine's a friend, Maxine's a local constituent, but it's not appropriate behaviour for a shadow frontbencher, because the article was littered with problems. I mean, just take the fact that Maxine Peak dismissed everybody who voted for the Tory party in the last election as a Tory.
Yeah.
Therefore, we don't want their votes. And it's like, the whole point about winning elections is you've got to win the votes of people who don't initially agree with you.
Right.
And you don't get people to agree with you by saying, you're morally wrong. You voted for the Tories. You're really evil. They're evil. You're evil. I see no distinction. Oh, can I have your vote?
Well, it's very much the Corbynista line that was taken in the hours immediately after the election result on December the 13th, isn't it? Where you got the likes of John McDonnell and others saying, well, obviously, you know, we've been betrayed by the voters, as opposed to actually admitting that maybe your message was not particularly palatable to the voters.
Yeah, look, traditionally it's what the Labour Party does. The after election defeat, the left of the Labour Party, first they blame the leadership and then they blame the voters. In this case, they couldn't blame the leadership because they had the part. You know, they had complete control of the party. One of the strangest things since last year's thrashing of the Labour Party has been the attempt by Corbynites to blame anybody but themselves. They had the leadership, they had the general secretary of the party, they controlled all the regions of the party. They had the manifesto. They even added new mad things to the manifesto during the election campaign. It was their election campaign, their defeat. They should wear it, which is one of the reasons why, to be honest, I would never have appointed Rebecca Long-Bailey in the first place. She ran against Keir Starmer to take the party in a particular direction, continuity Corbynism. Once she was beaten, she should have been put on the backbench to show that that part of the party had been beaten and had no future in the Labour Party. You can see by her lack of judgment why she should have no future in the Labour Party. And you can see by the harumphing of the left who feel it's really unclear what actually they're defending. Is it the right to promote conspiracy theories? First they came for the conspiracy theorists and I said nothing.
Right. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I must admit, right, I mean, I've seen many conspiracy theories in my time, as I'm sure you have, John. It's not the worst offence I've ever seen. And of course, those who are sure about themselves and their kind of criticism of Israel and their support for Palestine will say that this is an entirely typical example of how you can't say anything against Israel, because it's not so much anti-Jewish, this particular statement, it's more anti-Israel, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, it's a lie. And the question is, why would you believe in a lie about Israel? It's because you don't believe in the right of the state of Israel to exist.
Yeah.
And you can't kind of shimmy around it by kind of going, it would have been bad if it were true. If you read anything about the Israeli government and law enforcement, not just in the US, but everywhere, what they do is they do training in counterterrorism, because they have sadly had a lot of experience of terrorist attacks quite recently in Israel. And America has started to have its own domestic terrorism. There's that appalling homophobic slaying in Florida. There was the jihadist killer in California. Their police haven't had experience of these kinds of attacks. They went to get some training and some learning from the people who knew how to do it. Now, to turn that into something that why do you need to have the state of Israel involved to condemn the killing of George Floyd? It's because you want to associate Israel with something that's utterly evil.
Yeah.
And that has to be based in some view of yours of the illegitimacy of the state of Israel. And it is hard to take away that from a view of the world which is at base anti-Semitic.
Yes, but she's clearly batty, Maxine Peak, as well. I mean, she's going on about the end of capitalism and, how she really believes that capitalism is the root of all evil. It's all very well. And when I read it, I actually felt like it was a sort of parody of the far left written by Monty Python. That's how mad it was. So the idea that Rebecca Long-Bailey would actually associate herself with any of it was quite extraordinary.
Oh, well, look, I mean, Maxine Peak herself has actually apologized for that element of her article, which even Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Well, she hasn't quite apologised. She's issued some kind of retraction, which hasn't actually said the word sorry.
Yeah, look, I think by and large, politicians should be held to a very high standard for what they say about politics. It's their profession. I think, actors, musicians, ordinary members of the public, they have much lower standards that they're held to, because it's not their profession. And if you're on the front bench, you're in one of the highest roles. Rebecca Long-Bailey has been responsible for fashioning the Labour Party education policy, which at the moment has been about returning to schools. And whatever you think about the farce of Gavin Williamson saying it's safe, then it's not safe, you have to return your kids, you don't, all these things, Rebecca Long-Bailey gave bad advice to Keir Starmer, which allowed Boris Johnson to beat him at PMQs a couple of weeks ago, because Keir didn't have the right position, because he was sitting there knowing the Labour Party's official position was simply was a photocopy of what the National Education Union had asked Labour to say, which the bad old days when the NUT, as it was, the National Education Union as it is now, get to dictate Labour Party policy on education. So, you know, for a whole load of reasons, Labour's in a much stronger position today, stronger leader, strong signal about the fight against anti-Semitism, the intolerance of that kind of attitude, strong signal that you might actually get a proper education policy, not just on COVID return to schools, but the whole range of issues facing the Shadow Education Secretary. And the chance to make a marquee appointment, a marquee signing as your Shadow Secretary, you know, this will be a big sign of the intention.
It will be. And who do you think that will be?
Well, I think he should make Liz Kendall the Shadow Education Secretary. She is, of the people on the front bench who are not in the Shadow Cabinet, she's clearly the one that's got has got the greatest talent and should be. Or, you know, Pat McFadden, make Pat McFadden Shadow Education Secretary. There's a lot of the experienced front benchers who are now back on the front bench because of Keir, who spent a long time on the back bench because of Corbynism. Peter Kyle, I think, is a very strong. There's a lot of talent that was held down and held back by Corbyn. The right appointment will make a really big signal to other members of the PLP. You know, it's not just that bad behaviour gets punished, it's that talent is recognised.
True enough, but also, as you said at the start, it's maybe a bit of both when it comes to a pre-planned sort of assault on the far left and or just happenstance that this was an opportunity presented itself to Keir Starmer to get rid of Rebecca Long-Bailey. But he's got some way to go if it's the beginning of something, because he's got Naz Shah in his shadow cabinet. She's a shadow minister for community cohesion. You know, she's been in trouble before about some of the things that she said about the Jewish religion and the Jewish race. She's also, you know, representative of a sort of a part of the Labour Party, you know, which is very pro-Palestine.
There's no contradiction to being pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. Almost, you know, the last few decades have been dedicated to a peaceful solution of a two-state solution for Israel-Palestine. Supporting Palestine is like you don't have to hate Israel to support Palestine. You can, like I do.
No, but some people in the Labour Party do, John, as you well know, and that's the root of the problem, it would seem.
I think you can. You think you have to distinguish these things. You have to say that Keir Starmer has just drawn a line, standard behaviour. If other people on the front bench cross that line, they'll be sacked too. I think it's really clear what you can and cannot say as the Labour Party. Should there be peace between Israel and Palestine? Absolutely. Are there issues about the Netanyahu government? I'm a long-term supporter of the Israeli Labour Party, as are most members of the Labour Party. You know, we'd like to see a different government in Israel, just like we'd like to see a different government here, a different government in the United States. In the UK, which is the place where we fight for votes, we have to win votes from interest, moderate voters. We have to win votes back from people who voted Tory maybe for the first time in their life, maybe for the third or fourth time in their life at the last election. It doesn't matter how long you've been voting Tory for. The point is you didn't vote for the Labour Party. You have to bring those people back. And what you have to show as a leader is, you know, forensic ability, he's got it. You've got to show strength. Yes, I think he's got that, a mandate. You've got to show steel, and you've got to show the will to kill. You've got to be willing to take out your opponents. And the thing about, was this a strategy or not? Probably not. But actually, the best leaders take advantage of any opportunity that comes up. This advantage has been taken, and I think it strengthened Keir immensely. And it probably, despite Bournemouth beaches, it's probably cut through to the country as well. It's another brick in a wall. Like it's a long way back for Labour. We were damaged so badly by Jeremy Corbyn that it may well be 10 years before the Labour Party can realistically be back in government. But some of the key elements have been put in place, and it's important to do them as early as you can.
Well, it's a good start, I think, let's say that. And also, I suppose the one thing we should allow you to have a free open goal on is a good day for Robert Generick.
Well, yes, look, I'm a very sad person. As soon as Robert Generick released 149 pages of correspondence, I read every single one of those pages. And there were some very revealing moments. My personal favorite was the civil servant who said, I could write something that tried to strengthen the Secretary of State's arguments, but I wouldn't want to put anything down in writing that could then be used as evidence in a future appeal. I mean, I think we got a very harsh light shone into the way that some government decisions are making. And yeah, this may be a good day for Robert Generick, though I suspect the story isn't going away because he's kind of got everything. He's got money, he's got property, he's got conflict of interest.
Hasn't quite got a killer fact, though, has it?
It has got. I mean, from anybody who knows the civil service, I think there is a killer fact, which is there's reference right throughout it to a readout from there'll be a readout from a meeting with Robert Generick, and a readout, and the readout is he wants the application to go ahead. I mean, that's not a readout, that is an instruction, and the time of the instruction is very, very well. It is within days of meeting.
Yeah, but I mean, we're out of time, John, so we can't go any further. But I mean, you've been in government with Tony Blair as an advisor. You know how these things are done, and it's it's a very thin line between the way it should be done and the way it shouldn't be done. And I'm not sure that this one crosses it. I agree, it doesn't look great. But listen, we'll talk again soon. John McTernan, Tony Blair's former political secretary, on Keir Starmer. Has Keir Starmer just started a battle? Has he just fired the starting gun on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? Because if he has, he's going to have quite a long way to go before he can clean out the sewer of anti-Semitism which exists within the Labour Party, and I'm sorry to say, which exists in people like John McDonnell, Owen Jones, and some of the other far-left sort of hard nuts who have come out and said that Rebecca Long-Bailey should never have been fired. That's their problem.